Hello, this is Mr. Meyer. The purpose of this screencast is to help families better understand the transition Bloomington Public Schools is making from what we previously called a report card to our new standard-based progress report. Standards. Districts are required to build curriculum around state standards so all students have access to high-quality content instruction. In other words, standards are the foundation of our curriculum. State standards specify the knowledge and skills students are expected to master at each grade level. Assessments. There are three types of assessments. The first type is accountability assessments. Those are the MAP, measures of academic progress, and grades 1 through 5 do this in the fall and spring in reading and math. And then there's the MCA, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, for grades 3 through 5 in reading and math. And then 5th grade takes a science test as well, and it's only done once a year in the spring. Then there's the benchmark assessments. Bloomington's Early Kindergarten Assessment, or BECA, is for kindergarten. That's what we use to figure out where students are when they come to us, like what their letter sounds, how many sight words they know, and things, numbers and whatnot. And then there's the Fountainist and Pinnell Benchmark Assessment System, for BASS, for grades 1 through 5, and that's done twice a year in the fall and in the winter, and it's used for teachers to help them figure out where to start their instruction. And then there's end of unit assessments. The ELA, which is language arts, math, science, social studies, and health, have these. Why is Bloomington changing report cards? To clearly articulate specific learning goals within the curriculum at each grade level. By doing this, we'll better communicate to families information about each child's individual strengths, progress toward mastering end-of-the-year grade level goals, and areas where additional development and support may be needed. Because the progress reports that we're going to start this winter are very specific to skills. A traditional report card to a standards-based. A traditional report card averages the scores of concepts. So you might have, under numeration, you might have 3 different scores, and then they average the scores and give you a grade. The focus is on track to the end of the year goals, like how a person is doing or child is doing at one point in comparison to the end of the year. So, for example, if you are a runner and you're going to start a marathon and you're going to run it in June, but you're going to start training in September. In December, you're running 15 miles. Well, when you look at that, you're thinking, I can run 15 miles in December? Well, that means I'm doing pretty well because I'm not even halfway through the year and I'm over halfway to my goal. So I must be doing really well, so I'm going to get a 4. Okay? Traditionally, if a student receives a lot of A's, they would be considered advanced or exceeding standards. But in standards-based reporting, he or she would be proficient or climbing up the hill. And I'll reference that in standards-based report cards or progress reports. So you have average scores of concepts. In a standard-based progress report, you have specific skills. In a traditional report card, you focus is on track. In a standards-based progress report, focus is on progress towards end-of-the-year goals, where it at in the entire journey. So if your child, and this is the biggest change for families, if your child is at 15 miles in December, if I'm using the analogy of the marathon, that means that, yes, maybe they're doing well in comparison to how the year is going, but 15 miles is just a little over halfway towards our goal, so you would receive a 2. So it's in comparison to the end of the year, not how we're doing at a specific time of the year. And then advanced or exceeding standards means going beyond grade level expectations or flying off the hill. That's the reference I made in the third bullet on traditional report cards. Pros and cons. Pros. This new progress report is specific to each standard. Transparency of expectations, so you know exactly what the child's doing in a specific skill. Consistency across grade levels. Cons. Many more standards, so there's more specific, causes more information to be shared. Effort and character traits are separate, they're not combined. And then it's a change from what we're used to. Families grew up with a grading system with averages. Here's our report card for 4th grade. So if you look here, the very top one in reading literature, refer to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. That tells you exactly how that child is doing on that specific skill. In the past, we might have 4 of these, but you might get a 3 based on how well you did on these 4 in literature. So your literature score would be a 3. Whereas here we're telling you how well you're doing on each specific skill. That's a big difference than what our previous report cards are. And then here is the math portion and the specials as well as life skills. Question and answers. Why are there so many line items in ELA? Grades were often based on averages of work related to skills within each category, as I've mentioned earlier. The new structure describes specific learning goals for the year and provides an estimate of how proficient a student is related to each goal based on the teacher's most recent assessment data. So if a child does assessment on summary and they got a 2 in Unit 2, and then they did a summary assessment and they got a 3 in Unit 3, that child would receive a 3 on how to write a summary. In the past, we would average the 2 and you'd have a score. Okay, so you're taking where you're at this particular moment. That's how the new progress reports are being completed. Why is the maximum score a student can receive in some areas a 3? Well, some of the standards, particularly those in the foundational skills and language strands, call for students to acquire very basic knowledge and skills. Example, following words from left to right. This is a skill for kindergarten. Top to bottom, page by page. Understanding that words are separated by spaces and print, letter sounds. You can't really fly off the hill, so to speak, on this standard. And there's not a strong need to provide meaningful enrichment in these basic standards, like I kind of said. And then instructional time is better spent moving on to standards in which students can demonstrate higher level thinking. How do the numbers compare to traditional letter grades? Is a 4 similar to an A, 3 to B, 2 to C, and 1 to D? Standard-based grading and traditional grading are two very different systems of measuring and reporting student achievement. They're very different. A traditional grading system, grades are often based on averages. You've heard me say that earlier in this screencast. The two systems cannot be directly compared, but a 3 indicates that the students consistently shows evidence of understanding and applying the knowledge of skills reflected in the standards and is more similar to an A than a B. So it's coming up on a regular basis. That means it would be a 3, and that means in a traditional setting, probably an A. My child has typically earned quite a few 4s in the past. Why is this not the case now? In the past, 4s were sometimes given for doing more work rather than higher quality work. In the new assessment system, students are measured against specific grade level standards which represent, and this is the key, end of the year expectations. Let me say it again, end of the year expectations, where they're at in comparison to the end of the year. And lastly, it's unlikely most students would be meeting all the end of the year expectations, much less exceeding them in January. So you're going to see 2s and 3s in this report card. And you're not where you're saying, well, my child usually gets 3s and 4s. That's because the end of the year goal is a 3, but if they're not there yet, we give them a 2. Will Bloomington move towards standards-based report card in the other subjects? If so, when? Yes, Bloomington will move towards standard-based progress reports in math grading change in January of 2019. At this time, we're not working on math. We're continuing to average because we're working on the language arts at this moment. Well, these are the resources that I used for this screencast. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, your teacher, or anyone at Bloomington Public Schools to help answer them. With that, I wish you a good night, and thank you for your support.